Alright, I'm here to address something that's really been getting on my nerves ever since the Marvel Cinematic Universe started back in 2008. And that's basically the whole Sony/Fox hate bandwagon, where people just constantly talk shit about these two companies, how they ruined Spider-Man, how they've ruined the X-Men, they destroyed Fantastic Four, Ghost Rider, and all that stuff. Now, while I do think there is some truth, Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance was awful. I actually liked the first Ghost Rider movie. The Fantastic Four movies were both crap, and I will say that there is some truth and some pretty valid complaints to how Fox and Sony have handled some Marvel properties. But let's look at what good they've done. I mean, Sony and Sam Raimi basically created Spider-Man 1, which, along with X-Men 1 back in 2000 and 2001, reinvigorated the comic book movie genre after Batman and Robin effectively killed it in the late 90s. Sure, Blade came out earlier in 1998 or 1999, I can't remember right now, and it did sort of set the stage for these two films, but really X-Men 1 and Spider-Man 1 completely reinvigorated the comic book movie genre. And while I do have my problems with both of those films, I still consider them to be good movies that do have some pretty major flaws, and their influence on pop culture and the whole genre of comic book movies, you cannot dispute that. Like, these films pretty much put CBMs back on the map. They showed audiences and Hollywood that people will watch these films and they can make money if you do them right, and if you don't, screw around with them. Then we got Spider-Man 2 and X-Men 2, which I consider to be some of the greatest superhero films of all time. Some people, still bitch about X-Men 2. Well, it wasn't faithful to the source material. Personally, I'm in the camp of, if you're going to change the source material, make the change work. Make it work, and I won't care that you change it from the source material and stuff. And I consider both these films to be some of the best ones ever made. And now I just see all these hateful, rage-filled, spiteful comments about how much they suck, how much they ruined comic book movies, by all these people that just a few years ago couldn't stop talking about how awesome these films were, and now suddenly they're crap simply because there's a Marvel Cinematic Universe directly made by Marvel. Now, X-Men 3 is a piece of crap. It's a complete... I hate X-Men 3 probably more than any other person on the planet, simply because I think X2 is one of the best films I've ever seen in my life. Yes, I know there are many, many other films that are, by their very quality, a lot better than X2, but among my personal favorite, X2 is one of my favorite films of all time. X3 was a piece of crap, I admit that. Spider-Man 3, in my opinion, gets a lot of undeserved crap from people. I think it's a very flawed film, but I still think there are some good things about it, and those good things are sort of good enough to elevate it to to a score of like 6 or 7. It's a terribly flawed film, but I really can't blame Sam Raimi because Sony kind of screwed him over. They basically told him, you have to do Venom, even though he's repeatedly stated that he hates Venom and stuff, that he likes the classic Spider-Man villains more and not so much the later ones and stuff. X3 was also plagued by these creative differences. Bryan Singer originally wanted to direct a third and fourth film, an X-Men third and fourth film, back-to-back and stuff, and was going to deal with the Phoenix. The Cure was probably going to come into later on. Then they got Brett Ratner involved, and that film was just screwed since then. And, as for X-Men Origins Wolverine, I actually like that movie a lot more than some people. I put it in the same camp as Spider-Man 3. It has many good points that are good enough to elevate it to a score of like 6 or 7. It does have its big flaws that keep it from being a better film, but I still think it's essentially a good movie. So yeah, I don't understand why Fox and Sony get all this crap from people, especially since they've been responsible for some of the most influential, important comic book films of all time. Were it not for these were it not for these companies actually investing in comic book movies and actually making X-Men and Spider-Man 1 back in 2000, the comic book movie genre would probably be dead. Because Batman and Robin effectively killed it. It basically shot the comic book movie film genre, in the head and left it to bleed out in a dark alley and die. And these two films completely invigorated it. And I don't understand why people are suddenly taking a shit on all these good movies simply based on the fact that Marvel has its own cinematic universe. And the excuse I get from people is that the Marvel cinematic movies are all leaps and bounds superior to anything Fox and Sony has ever done, which I think is a complete load of bullshit, because Captain America: The First Avenger was one of the most boring movies I've ever seen in my life. I actually walked out of the theater halfway through simply because nothing happened in the entire fucking movie. I haven't seen Incredible Hulk, so I cannot comment. Iron Man 1 and Avengers are, in my opinion, the only great comic book films to come out of the MCU. Thor was mediocre. Captain America: First Avenger was a complete piece of crap. Iron Man 2 was pretty good. In my opinion, I like it more than the majority, but it still has its flaws and stuff. So the MCU is not perfect. And don't even get me started on Iron Man 3, which is just a complete train wreck. The more I talk about it and the more I think about that movie, the more I hate it, and the more I just think it's a colossal failure on Marvel's part. So Marvel has made some bad films in the MCU, some disappointing ones. They are not the gods of comic book movies, who are the only ones capable of getting the source material right. Simply because they made these characters does not mean they get them the best. I mean, look at what they've been doing with Spider-Man for the past 6 years, or with Wolverine for the past 10 years. It's blatantly obvious Marvel doesn't know what the fuck they are doing with either of these characters, and they just don't get them anymore. They do not get Spider-Man or Wolverine at all. They just don't. And as for Amazing Spider-Man, the reboot, I really like it. I actually like it more than any of the Raimi films. I don't know. I just like the cast more. I think the story was better. I'm not really big on the whole retelling the origin and thing. I think that was kind of pointless and stuff. But I'm really looking forward to Amazing Spider-Man 2. I'm looking forward to X-Men Days of Future Past. I'm a bit nervous because the cast of that movie is huge and stuff, and I'm afraid it might have the X-Men 3 thing where all of these characters are hyped up and then they just end up having a cameo at best. As for some of the other X-Men movies, I really like X-Men First Class. I'm kind of wish it was X-Men Origins Magneto, because I think Magneto's the best of the bunch, and I think a James Bond-esque Magneto movie set in the 60s would have just been amazing. But whatever, I'm kind of excited for the Wolverine. So a lot of the promotional material so far for that film has been pretty damn good. In my opinion, the trailers are not some of the people or the actors I see in the trailer look really off to me. There's this one girl with pink hair and her head is deformed or something, and I feel disgusted just watching her and stuff. But yeah, I'm kind of going off topic here. Basically what I want to say is I don't get what is up with this whole Fox and Sony hate thing that's been going on the past few years. Simply because Marvel are the ones who created these characters doesn't mean that they understand them the best. There have been plenty of examples, besides Spider-Man and Wolverine, where Marvel simply hasn't gotten these characters. Look at the entire 90s. The entire 90s were Marvel just taking a shit and destroying all of their characters one by one until there was practically nothing left. And that's the truth. I don't get it. I don't get it. Sure, these companies have made some bad comic book movies. They have, and that's undeniable. But Marvel themselves have also made some bad, disappointing, or mediocre films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And again, I cannot stress this enough. Simply because they made these characters does not mean they know them the best. And I'm so sick and fucking tired of Sony and Fox being treated like Satan or whatever, even though they've made some films that are, in my opinion, better than most of the MCU stuff. In my opinion, X-Men 2 is just as good as Avengers. Hell, no, I'll actually go even farther and say X-Men 2 I like more than Avengers. That's how good I think it is. I think X2 is the Dark Knight of the early 2000s before The Dark Knight came out. That's how much I love X2. And I just see all these hateful comments about people just taking a shit on all these good movies and suddenly hating them, while a few years ago they were all basically saying they were revolutionary. They invigorated the whole genre and they basically saved it from doom. And now they're all just hating on it, and it really fucking pisses me off that these people have just jumped on this bandwagon instead of voicing their own opinion. And that's just a big problem I have with society in general. It's everything these days is just people jumping onto bandwagons just to look cool and hip and all that stupid bullshit instead of voicing their own opinion. And I'm gonna be sorry when I say this. I like some of the things that Fox and Sony have done with the Marvel properties. Have they all been good? No. Has every Marvel Studios produced Marvel film been good? Fuck no. They've both made mistakes, and they should both be held accountable for them, but neither of them should be called crap or, the gods of comic book films. They've both made mistakes, but they've both done some good stuff. And I kind of think they're all kind of a mixed bag, and they're sort of on the same level as far as I'm concerned. So that's just what I think about this whole Sony/Fox hate bandwagon thing. It really annoys me, and I'm just so sick and tired of all these people just saying all these spiteful things when a few years ago they were basically calling some of the Fox Sony movies like revolutionary and fantastic, and now they're just acting like assholes and pretending to hate them just so that they can look cool on the internet. Let me tell you one thing about being cool on the internet. No one over the age of 2 gives a flying fuck how cool you are on the internet. Voice your own honest-to-God opinion in a good way, and not like in a way of, these are the worst comic book movies ever because Hugh Jackman are 6'4" and he are not 4'7" or some stupid bullshit like that. Oh, and that reminds me of one last thing before I go. All of you people that complain about Wolverine not having the blue costume, I just have to ask you, are you fucking insane? There is no way in the universe, in the Ultraverse, the Omniverse, the Multiverse, every universe, that costume can be done in live action and not look like crap. If you're going to do the Wolverine costume, do his X-Force one, because I honestly think the X-Force costume is the only one that can be done in live action and look good. The yellow Wolverine suit cannot be done in live action and not look completely fucking stupid. It's the same thing as with Galactus. I'm sorry, I just don't think you can do Galactus in live action and not make him look completely ridiculous. I just can't, unless you make him a droid, like a giant robot or something like that. I just can't see him working, and I just can't see the Wolverine costume working in live action unless it's the X-Force one. So those are basically my thoughts on this Sony/Fox hate bandwagon thing. It really annoys me, and I hope I'm not alone in this when I say that these people are just pretending to hate these companies even though they've done some pretty cool stuff. And I got nothing else to say about this one. I'm out.